to another episode of Haunted Hollywood Hour, coming to you from Biddy Mason's Los Angeles. Who is Biddy Mason? Hopefully she'll be your new favorite person. And if we can all work together, we can get Ryan Coogler to make a film about this story, which is the extraordinary tale of an enslaved woman who wins her freedom, the California free Black community who comes together to help her, the white authorities who, surprisingly, actually do the right thing when faced with injustice. I mean, the bar is on the floor, but these are some of the very few white men in history who actually step over it, and how Biddy Mason went from enslavement to becoming the wealthiest woman of color in the West, and who used her earnings to improve her community. And here to help me tell this story is Judy from New Jersey, who is an actor, who is a mother of actors and talented kids, and who is a caretaker by trade as well. So you have so much to contribute here. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited for any commentary that you might have with this story. Especially you have a little knowledge of Georgia. You have a East Coast knowledge, I think, which is an important perspective on this. And most of the information from this incredible tale comes from the LAist article by the wonderful Hadley Mears called "The Contentious Hearing That Made Biddy Mason a Legend." And the link to that is in the show notes. And also Hadley's article for LAcurbed.com. Biddy Mason, one of LA's first Black real estate moguls. By the way, send LA-ish money because they lost $3.4 million in federal funding. You know why? Because our current administration is making some unfortunate choices. So head over to support.laist.org and become a member if you care about public media and unbiased reporting and information. So let's tell the story of Biddy Mason. Biddy is born into slavery. Research shows that she was likely born in Hancock County, Georgia. Do you know anything about that part of Georgia at all?
Not really. I only know like the Atlanta and Savannah area.
Okay.
I know they have a lot of peaches.
Yay, peaches. Yes, so if anyone is from Hancock County, Georgia, or knows anything about it, write in and tell us. But she's likely born in Hancock County, Georgia, August 15th, 1818, so she's a Leo. And according to the research of Dr. Kevin Waite and Dr. Sarah Beringer Gordon at the University of Pennsylvania, Biddy likely moved from Georgia to Mississippi in the early 1830s when she's still a child. And in the 1840s, Robert Smith, a Mississippi landowner who's actually a recent convert to Mormonism, purchases her. And do you know anything about Mormonism at all?
I do know some. Unfortunately, a lot of what I know is from the Book of Mormon or South Park, but I do know, I have seen Big Love, but I do know a few people who are Mormons, so I have some knowledge.
What's your favorite part from Book of Mormon?
Oh, I just like when he marches right into the camp of the drug dealing general and just starts singing to him and holding his hand. And I love how, he says that in 1970 something, God changed his mind about Black people. Apparently, the Mormons didn't believe that Black people went to heaven until late in the 70s. So
yeah, there's a whole interesting thing. It from what I could read, it starts out the Mormons are anti-slavery, which makes sense. I think if you're a religion, you should probably be anti-slavery. Mm-hmm. And then as they start growing and as they start getting more followers around the 1840s, 1850s, they change their mind, which if your religion changes their mind about owning humans, chances are your religion is going down the wrong track.
But look, they changed their mind again, so I don't know.
Yeah, I am fascinated by Mormonism. All cults, I think, are pretty fascinating. And if there's any listeners who are Mormon and you're having a good experience, I'd love to hear that. as well. Robert Smith. Okay, so Robert Smith is the Mississippi landowner who purchases Biddy in the 1840s. And he has a sickly wife named Rebecca and less than 20 slaves, and probably grew cotton. And while owned by him, we can assume Biddy tended to Rebecca and did a mixture of domestic work and farm labor. But also at a pretty young age, Biddy gives birth to 3 daughters named Ellen, Anne, and Harriet. While we don't know who the father is, on findagrave.com, which is where you can look up people's genealogy and where they're buried, Robert Smith is listed as the father of Biddy's daughters, which is unfortunate and realistic and probably something that happens a lot back then.
Sounds legit.
Yeah.
It just seems like every time it's a sickly wife and they have a domestic slave, and then a slave is, having the children often for these, sick women. So it's like they're bringing these poor people in, not only to slave for them, but also to produce them children. So it's like even more disgusting than you would think.
Yeah, it's awful. And it gets awful pretty fast, especially as I researched the genealogy and Robert Smith's own children with his wife. He had a lot of sons and he had maybe 1 daughter. He had a lot of women that he owned or that his family owned. And you can just imagine all those sons, him, just awful situation that Biddy is growing up in, probably being sexually assaulted by these men. In the 1840s, about 200 people in Mississippi convert to Mormonism. And they're doing this mission movement. And then in the late 1840s, 70,000 people migrate to Utah from various states during the Great Mormon Exodus. And Robert Smith is among this group called the Mississippi Saints, which is a contingent of Mississippi Mormons who travel to Utah. Prior to the assassination of Joseph Smith, Mormons, like I said, mostly opposed to slavery, but then after Smith is assassinated, they change their mind and they believe, and this is extremely messed up, that the descendants of Ham, meaning people of African heritage, they are in bondage because God placed them there. And it's God's will, which is so convenient. If you are a white person who owns land and you want free labor, you can just say it's God's will that I do this. And I'm sure many atrocities in history can be just, it's God's will that this is happening. I own my wife. This is God's will. I can tell her to do whatever I want. It's God's will. So it's a whole lot of bad. According to the LAist article, Mormons are encouraged to treat enslaved people kindly. Right, I'm sure.
How nice
I'm sure that actually.
How nice to treat your slaves kindly. I mean, what a guy.
If you wanted to treat your slaves kindly, maybe don't own people. Maybe don't own people. I don't know. So in 1848, the Smith family begins traveling west. Biddy, her daughters, a woman named Hannah, and her children are forced to walk on foot behind the wagon 1,600 miles, herding sheep the whole way. So that whole Mormon thing about we treat our enslaved people kindly, I don't see how forcing someone to walk on foot 1,600 miles is treating someone kindly. But maybe they have a different definition.
There's a lot of information from the time that they would say that like they were helping them, go to heaven because they were having them, do God's work, which conveniently is their work, but I guess it's God's as well. But that's how they would, explain themselves off to people who didn't agree with it. Well, I'm helping them get to heaven because as one does, right?
Yeah. It just shows you like evil people can explain away anything that they do, and they can, you can manipulate whatever it is, religion or your own brain logic, to advocate for like child abuse. Oh, I'm hitting my children because I love them. Oh, I'm verbally abusing my children because I love them. All the things. Being that there are anti-slavery folks in Iowa and Kansas, there may have been opportunities to flee, but again, did the people who were enslaved know this? Probably not. And also, they had children at a very young age, and they are going to take care of their children and not put their children at risk. So Biddy and Harriet probably are just focused the whole time on, keeping their kids safe, keeping them healthy, doing the right thing. And as we come to learn more about Biddy, she is all about taking care of people, and she's just a really, really kind person. The Smiths live in Cottonwood Canyon, Utah for a time, and then in 1851 decide to help settle the new Mormon colony in San Bernardino, which is near the Santa Ana River. And San Bernardino is about 65 miles from east of Los Angeles. I actually lived out that way for a little bit. It's out in the desert. There's a little bit of greenery around the river, but during the 19th century, it's an important commercial hub at the crossroads between Los Angeles and the rest of the Southwest. And the Mormons who move there base their town on the so-called City of Zion plan, which is the Mormon way of establishing communities. So they have compact communities rather than individual isolated farms. And these communities provide opportunities for education, cooperation, fine arts, worship. And Mormon towns are characterized by large lots, wide streets, large blocks. And each little city block is like a mini farm with animals, barns, and gardens. So we're getting a mental picture of what it's like to live there. At the time, California is controlled by white Southern men and their Latino allies. And here's the thing. In 1850, the reason California was allowed to enter the Union was because it would be a free state. And the Constitution says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, unless for the punishment of crimes, shall ever be tolerated in this state. So you may be wondering, what the fuck are these slave owners doing bringing enslaved people into California where slavery is allegedly illegal? And here's the thing, that unless for the punishment of crimes bit is doing a lot of legwork here. The first laws that get passed in California when it becomes a state allows any California citizen, any California white citizen, to point to an indigenous person who is not working and call them a drunken Indian. And then that indigenous person gets rounded up and arrested and basically put in a cage. And then they get sold off to be contract laborers for the elites. And they have no ability to leave. And in fact, in the 1850s in Los Angeles, there are these weekend slave marts where the cops would round up any Native American who is not working and then auction them off. And this is one of the major sources of income for the city of Los Angeles at the time. And then they would...
Fascinating. I never knew that.
And they don't teach you this in high school, and certainly not in California high school when I was growing up. I had to learn this on my own. And to make matters worse, they wouldn't even pay the indigenous people they rounded up. They would pay them in liquor so that they would then get drunk and then have an excuse to round them up again. So it was a vicious cycle.
That's ingenious. How could, give the people booze and now they're in, bad drunken people, so they have to go to work, and here's your reward for working. Have some more booze.
The thing about capitalism is there is no endpoint to the evil strategies that these white colonial capitalists will employ in order to get whatever free labor, free resources from anyone else. And there is no limit to just the depravity that these early American colonizers are capable of. So
imagine if they had used these talents for good things.
Imagine.
Just imagine that.
I mean, you have this huge country. You know, you could use it to better people's lives. You could work in harmony with the people who live there. You could not kill off all the buffalo. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. So Robert Smith, who owns 13 enslaved women and children at this point, does really well in San Bernardino in the cattle business, where Biddy is likely working alongside the indigenous people who have been forced into slavery to work with him. And though Smith is a counselor to the local leader in the Mormon church, which is known as a bishop, he's known for being difficult and argumentative, and things are spicy between him and the San Bernardino Mormon leaders. The colony begins to fall apart when the leaders end up paying way too much for what they think is 80,000 acres, but turns out to only be 35,000 acres. And they can't pay off their loans, and the colony sues the people who sold them this land. But the colony loses because, according to the judge and the justice system, the leaders didn't make a point to understand the fine print of the deal. And so Smith's ranch and others now have to be turned over to the church, and they don't get any compensation for their land or the money they put into it. There's widespread dissent in the Mormon group. In 1855, Smith is excommunicated, so he sells off his cattle and prepares to move to Texas. Now, keep in mind, he's been here now for like 2 to 4 years, owning enslaved people in California, which is essentially a free state. He's preparing to move to Texas, likely because it's also a slave state. But before he leaves, he takes his family and his enslaved people to camp in the Santa Monica Hills, which is, he's traveling across the Southern California to the coast into the Santa Monica Hills, which is by the beach there, to get provisions and prepare for the eastward journey. And the researchers say that LA during this time is friendly to slave owners, since many early Angelenos are from the South, and they see, we're just going to keep it quiet, right? We're not going to say anything. But in December of 1855, just weeks before Smith is about to go to Texas, and if he goes to Texas, there's absolutely no way Biddy or Harriet or anyone else are ever getting free. Someone tips off the authorities that a group of Black folks are being held in Santa Monica Canyon and are about to be taken to Texas. Now, if he'd done this before April, if he'd taken them to Texas, it would have been fine, because the 1852 California Fugitive Slave Act allows slave owners to temporarily hold people in California before transporting them back to their home state. But the code had been allowed to lapse in April of 1855. And also, the problem is Smith is going to Texas, which is not his home state of Mississippi. So if people are looking into this too closely, he could get in trouble. So, but the question is enforcement. Who is going to enforce this law? So in December 31st, 1855, sheriffs from San Bernardino and Los Angeles go to Judge Benjamin Hayes with a writ of habeas corpus, and this commands an individual to produce those who are unlawfully imprisoned or confined. And the sheriffs raid Smith's camp, taking Biddy, Hannah, and their children into custody and bringing them to the city jail at the corner of Spring and Franklin Streets in downtown LA. LA people know where that is. Historian Dolores Hayden says that the person who tipped off authorities was likely a woman named Elizabeth Rowan, aka Winnie, who was a formerly enslaved Black woman who had settled in San Bernardino with a wealthy Black LA livery owner owner, Robert Owens. And these two people I'm so fascinated about. And I feel like these, if we did a Ryan Coogler movie, these would be the heroes in our movie. They worked for the U.S. government during the Civil War. They supplied the U.S. government with horses. Robert Owens was very well known, very well respected, and earned a lot of wealth from his business supplying horses. People think that the Owenses probably encountered Smith when Smith was trying to buy supplies. Like Smith probably went to the Owens and was like, hey, I need to buy some horses. I need to buy some supplies for my journey west. I see a scene where Elizabeth and Robert share a glance as this white guy comes in to buy horses and supplies. Maybe they see their black servants holding the horses like outside the window. And they're like, what is going on here? What is happening? And there's a whole community of free blacks in California. So that community would have seen this white guy with his 13 slaves and been like, nah, not today. You're not getting away with this. And that is the movie I would love to see. Like, I would love to see this community coming together and being like, how can we stop this guy? Because the challenge is only white people can go to the police and then charge another white person or like bear witness against a white person committing a crime, because that's the law. They probably had to make a deal with the police or find some connection who could talk to the police for them and point this out. And I wonder if Owens had to figure out a kind of tactful way of asking Biddy, like, what's going on here? What's your relationship to this man? Are you free to go? There would have been like a really interesting and possibly tense conversation there. But here's the thing. We will never know for sure who tipped off the authorities, because if that person were Black or Indigenous, it couldn't be put down in history books and it wouldn't have been legal. So let's now learn about this judge, Benjamin Hayes, who is going to oversee this trial. And he was kind of the hero in the situation because he issued the writ of habeas corpus. He was the one who was like, no, there is something wrong going on here and we have to make this right. And on the surface, he's not a guy who you think would be pro helping out the situation. He's born in Maryland, which is a slave state, and he even had slaves before moving to LA. And as a journalist, he'd written pro-Mormon articles and he'd met with pro-Mormon leaders. He'd seen that there were, quote unquote, Black servants at the Mormon settlement. So as preparations are being made for trial in 1856, Biddy's allowed to stay with the Owens family. I bet that was for the first time in her life. She's staying apart from white people telling her from what to do. She's living with a free Black family who are wealthy by their own right. I just can imagine what's probably going through her head at that point with her.
Probably also not having to be under the threat of sexual assault,
right?
Physical assault too. Probably the first time she slept it, like in her whole life.
Right. And just like being able to go day after day without being told what to do, being able to just kind of like rest with the Owens family. And even that, like if someone were to do like a short film on the months, before the trial, Biddy just living with the Owens family and what they talk about, what they, because the Owens are probably wanting to know, are you okay? And they also want to probably let her know, like, you're okay here. You're going to be fine. And she's probably like, wow, people, like, I could live like this. This could be my future. It's so great. And this could be my children's future. And what's really interesting, though, is the children are still kept at the county jail. I think that, like, for their own protection.
He could come and say, well, those aren't my slaves, but they're my children. And being that he's a man, he can take them. So that's probably the best thing they've ever used a jail for is to protect his kids.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, the whole time, Smith is trying to bribe the jailers to get the kids out. The jailers, good on them, are like, nah, we're not letting you into this jail. We're not letting you near these kids. Again, the bar is on the floor, but surprisingly, all the authorities in this are actually doing the right thing. The official court hearing begins on Saturday, January 19th, 1856, in Judge Ben's courtroom in downtown LA. And Hannah, this is the most tense scene in the movie. Hannah, who'd delivered a baby boy 2 weeks earlier, testifies that she wants to go to Texas and that she's going there by choice.
No.
I know. And there are long silences as she's answering the question. So you can imagine, Hannah, do you want to go to Texas by your own free will? And she's saying, yes, I want to go to Texas. And it's like, Hannah, blink twice if you're okay, right? And Judge Ben senses something is off here. And he can't, Harriet and Biddy can't testify by law against Robert Smith, but they can be witnesses and they can be questioned. And so Judge Ben sends the sheriff to go talk with Harriet. And only like in private quarters does Harriet say, I promised I would say in court that I wanted to go, but I don't want to go. If you bring me back to court, I'll have to say I want to go to Texas, but I don't want to go. The sheriff returns with an affidavit saying that Harriet doesn't want to go to Texas. And during the hearing, like I said, Robert Smith and his sons are absolute thugs. They're bribing anyone and everyone. They try to intimidate the jailer. They try to lure Biddy's daughters out of jail. They threaten the Owenses. They threaten the local grocer and the doctor. And they say, if this case isn't resolved on Southern principles, you'll all pay the price, all people of color. And hopefully people in the community are seeing this, and hopefully this is all damaging Smith's credibility. The judge takes Biddy into his chambers along with two gentlemen to act as observers, and he questions Biddy and her daughters. And when he asks whether she was going to Texas voluntarily, Biddy says, I always do what I have been told, but I have always been afraid of this trip to Texas. She chooses her words so carefully. And Judge Ben issues this statement, which gets published in the Black newspapers and is kind of taken as like a huge victory. Because imagine, no one at the time has ever seen a judge in this very like conservative Southern principles region side with actual justice. So he says, and it further appearing by satisfactory proof to the judge here that all the said persons of color are entitled to their freedom and are free and cannot be held in slavery or involuntary servitude. It is therefore argued that they are entitled to their freedom and are free forever. So he had to like proclaim this, I think also to make sure Biddy and Harriet knew, like, you are free to go at any time. And Judge Ben orders Smith to pay all the costs associated with the case. Nice. And I know, right? And for the care of those placed in guardianship of the sheriffs as they prepared for trial. And the trial is scheduled to continue on January 21st, but Smith is a no-show. He'd run off to Texas with
Of course he is.
With his tail between his legs, and he would die 35 years later in 1891.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It took 35 years.
I know. Too long.
Way too long.
With Smith gone, Biddy, Hannah, and their children are free.
Yay.
And Judge Ben says if they want to go to Texas, they can voluntarily, but they aren't actually allowed to bind their children into slavery. So their children are in a free state and they can never go back to slavery by the law. The judge, by showing basic human decency in pro-Confederate Los Angeles, would suffer terribly for this. He's accused of being an abolitionist, which I guess is a dirty word in this day and age, and his reputation is ruined. And to deal with all the hate he receives, he takes to drinking. He starts arriving to work so drunk that the court has to be shut down until he sobers up. And 7 years later, in 1863, he loses his judgeship. 23 years later, though, an 1886 letter reveals that the judge thinks it was all worth it, because years later, his son is thrown from a wagon and the boy is saved by one of the women he'd freed. Wow. And never says which one, but karma.
Yeah, that's crazy how that worked. However, he did become a drunk, yet no one put him into indentured service.
Right.
Heinous people would have been.
Right?
Of course.
Right. And I'm sure after he lost his judgeship and was no longer working, no one rounded him up and sold him at a slave mart.
Right? Oh, man.
So now citizens of Los Angeles, which is the wildest of Wests in the 1850s.
Carly, that's so funny that you say that it's the, wildest of the West, although I know it was, but for me in New Jersey, I just can't picture that. All I can picture is, California and either movie stars or hippies.
Yeah.
The Wild West.
Yeah, no, Los Angeles in the 1850s, there's no railroad, there's no stagecoach, there's not even telegraph.
Wow.
Everyone who comes out to Los Angeles, they are the roughest, the toughest. They're walking down the streets with Bowie knives and rifles on there. There's 4,000 people living in Los Angeles County at the time. So that's basically the size of a high school in terms of population. And there's only 80 Black residents. So Biddy becomes a nurse and a midwife to Judge Ben's brother-in-law. So Judge Ben continued to be a bit of a hero here, making sure that she has a job, whose name is Dr. John Strother Griffin, who also used to own slaves. Biddy stays close with the Owenses and lives with them for 10 years. And her eldest daughter, Ellen, marries their son, Charles. And so Ellen marries into a wealthy Black family.
Go Ellen.
Go Ellen. I want Ellen's story. Growing up in this Wild West Los Angeles, but to this, living with this wealthy Black family and what that's like. And it's like Bridgerton, but Wild West. Hannah, meanwhile, goes back to San Bernardino with her husband, Toby. Toby, sadly, would be murdered by a drunk white man 2 years later.
No surprise there.
Yep. Hannah's daughter, Anne, moves to LA and becomes neighbors with Ellen and Charles and marries and has 7 children. And things are not without challenges for Biddy. In 1857, her middle child, Anne, dies, likely due to a smallpox outbreak. As a midwife to Dr. Griffin, Biddy would deliver hundreds of babies and also get a lot of financial advice from the Griffins, who are very well off. They're prominent landowners, and also from the Owenses. And they would inspire Biddy to use her earnings to start buying property. For $250, which is about $5,000 in today's money, Biddy buys her first downtown lot of land in 1866 from a man named Mr. Buffin. And the plot is on Rural Springs Street between 3rd and 4th. And for anyone who's in Los Angeles and thinking Rural Springs Street, that's like downtown Los Angeles. If now you go there and it's like skyscrapers, right? It's like downtown Los Angeles, but at the time, it's just a desert dirt road. And the map that on the map that plots the area is called the Map of the Plains. That's what the little area says. And her daughter Ellen says there's a ditch of water on the place and a willow fence running around the plot. And Biddy tells Ellen that this first plot must never be sold. She's 48 at the time, so you guys, you can have a career change midlife. So she goes from a servant to a midwife to her third era, which is real estate mogul. She starts buying real estate for the next 30 years, and she goes on to have more than 20 tenants and plots in what is now Grand Central Market and San Pedro Street in Little Tokyo. Huge urban area. Millions of people nowadays live there.
Were her tenants all people of color?
That's a really good question. I'm assuming so, probably just for safety, because I could imagine white people killing their landlord if they're landlord and getting away with it, but I don't know. I should research that more.
But she's also advancing all those people who need places to live because they're probably not getting completely ripped off by their landlords now, and they're living in adequate housing. So that's a whole nother group of people that she helped.
Yeah. And this area has a lot of Chinese residents. So I wonder if her tenants are Chinese as well. Mm-hmm. And Biddy is known by every citizen as Aunt Biddy. The cottage at 311 Spring Street isn't just a home for her. She opens her doors and allows it to be a refuge for stranded and needy settlers. She runs a daycare on the property for working women and allows civic meetings to be held there. And as a nurse and a midwife, Biddy learns to speak fluent Spanish, gets along with even the most eminent people in LA, and newcomers always come to her for advice. And she's a philanthropist in a town that is a real hellhole. She's providing food, shelter, medicine. During floods and smallpox outbreaks, she tells the grocers to put everything on her bill so people can go to the grocer, get what they need, and Biddy will just pay for it. In 1872, a group of Angelenos found the first African Methodist Episcopal church at her house until they're able to move into their own building. And she's a frequent visitor to the jail and leaves words of cheer or a token to every prisoner. And I can imagine she's thinking about her daughters who were living in the jail during the trial, and how she probably got her start going to the jail to visit them, and was maybe thinking, I'm just going to say hi to everyone and make sure everyone feels good here. And in the slum, she's known as Grandma Mason. And eventually she sets up her own midwife business and remains close to her daughters and their children, insisting that her granddaughters become educated. And when one of her sons-in-laws tries to get her grandson to go into farming or blacksmithing, she insists that the boy pursue the profession of his choice. And her grandson, Robert Curry Owens, goes on to become a wealthy businessman and activist. And in 1884, she sells half of her Spring Street property for $1,500, which is about $50,000 in today money. And remember, she bought that for $250. And she also sold a property on Olive Street that she bought for $375 in 1868. She sells it for $2,800 in 1884, which is over $90,000 in today's money. And in 1885, she gives a portion of her remaining Spring Street property to her grandsons for the sum of love and affection and $10. Biddy Mason would eventually pass in 1891, strangely the same year as the man who once owned her, hopefully so she can see him in the afterlife and finally punch him in the face or something. I don't know.
Oh, he must have been, I would like to say he was rolling in his grave, but unfortunately he was still alive. Yeah. But on the other hand, maybe it is good because he had to live and probably hear about all this stuff she was doing.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best revenge.
Yeah. Her fortune was worth more at the time of her death, worth more than $300,000, which is $6 million in today's money. She is the richest woman of color in the West and one of the richest women in Los Angeles. And at that point, LA had 50,000 residents, and Biddy is still buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Boyle Heights, which is LA's oldest cemetery, built in 1877. And there was a family feud over her estate. Eventually, a majority of it went to her grandson, Robert, who became the wealthiest Black man in Los Angeles County. And the family kept Biddy's first homestead on Spring Street until the Depression, which makes me sad because she said, never sell this, but they had to sell it during the Depression. In 1988, nearly 100 years later, at a ceremony attended by Mayor Tom Bradley, the First AME Church placed a memorial stone on Biddy's unmarked grave. And the following year, they put a small park behind the Bradbury building, which is where her property once was. And the Biddy Mason Memorial Park is at 333 Spring Street. It's basically a long wall with photos and plaques. And it includes a representation of her signature, which is just an X. She signed her name with an X because she learned, multiple languages. She learned Spanish, but she couldn't read or write. And her surviving descendants are her great-great-great-great-granddaughters, Cheryl Cox and Dr. Robin Cox. And info about them is at the Biddy Mason Foundation and can be found on biddymason.info. Jackie Broxton, the executive director of the Biddy Mason Charitable Foundation, is now working on finding the location of each of the plots that Biddy bought in her life so a plaque can be put there. And the foundation serves to uplift LA's foster youth, and they make holiday dinners for the more than 400 people impacted by the foster care system. And her descendants continue her legacy of giving because these words from Biddy had been passed down through the many generations. And it's, if you hold your hand closed, nothing good can come of it. The open hand is blessed, for it gives abundance even as it receives.
Oh, that's so nice. What a queen.
I know, right?
What a queen.
And I'm mad I didn't know about her until literally a couple months ago.
I didn't know until you told me a couple days ago. It's absolutely fascinating. I was going to do some research, but I decided I didn't want to because I wanted to really just listen to this story from you and learn this, in a fun, organic way. And it's absolutely fascinating. What a queen.
And can't you see it as a movie or a miniseries? To me, this just screams miniseries because it's got everything. And especially the Owenses, who I would love to be these main characters in this movie. And, I want a movie about the Black community in the 1850s in this real rough Wild West Los Angeles, which is just brutal. I mean, when you listen to our LA coroner story, the things that people could get away with just doing the most terrible things and massacres happening, and this community supporting each other and also seeing this injustice and figuring out, okay, how can we get the cops to actually do something about this? How can we free these women?
Right. Because we all know how helpful the police are nowadays.
Yeah. All right. And it was probably way worse back then.
Right. It's so sad when you think about it, though, is that you're for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, you still have that same wonder is, will the cops actually help? So the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess.
Yeah, I have gone to the cops on multiple occasions with stalker situations, with dudes being terrible, even as a white woman not getting help. So I can imagine just how much worse it is for anyone who isn't white. But I will say I had been bothering the cops about a child abuse situation that happened in my neighborhood, and they actually did do something about it.
Hooray.
So, the clock is always right twice a day, I guess you could say. The broken clock is right twice a day.
Right. I always say that I'm sure there are good cops out there. I have never met one, but there has to be some. And I truly believe that. And people will tell me, yes, I know this really good person who's a cop. So I try to hold faith that there are some good ones out there. And I guess there must be, as we see from Biddy's story, because they did get some help. So
I wonder what it took, though, to get that help. Because I wonder, if you're writing the movie for this, I wonder if the Black community is like, how can we maybe encourage these women to leave without getting the cops involved? And then facing that resistance, because it's like, no, if we try to leave, he's going to kill us or our children or do a lot of harm. We can't do that. So that negotiation breaking down, and then, okay, we got to somehow get the cops involved. And maybe it's Owens offering to do a favor for the cops, because he's wealthy. Maybe he had to pay a bribe.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I would like to think it was, kindness or some, maybe they felt like they were Christians or whatever. But being that I'm a cynical person, I'm going to say bribery was probably a nice cash bribe, probably did it.
Yeah. And then, but then that the justice system actually did its thing, and so much luck had to occur at every step of the way. One, you needed the cops to report it. Then you needed to get a judge who would actually do the right thing and make the right call. And then you had to make sure that the jailers and everyone who's getting potentially bribed by Smith is being shielded in some way. And I wonder if the only thing that kind of stopped the jailers from accepting the bribe was maybe they were getting bribed by the Black community at a larger amount. And so I could almost imagine the Black community planning this justice that needed to occur, almost like a revolution in a way. Like it's making me feel like Andor. Have you seen Andor?
I haven't, but I'm so old. I was thinking of Popeye. Like, I've had all I can stand and I can't stand no more. They just had enough, and they were going to, try to make this right through Biddy and her family. That's just my,
Yeah.
But I haven't seen Andor yet. Should I?
Are you a Star Wars fan?
I like it. My son is a crazy Star Wars fan, so we have to be, through parenting. I kind of have to be too, because he forces me to watch everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm not, I'll watch a Star Wars movie, but I'm not like, I don't follow it a whole lot. But I watched Andor because I heard it was like very revolutionary, very like, and it's very inspiring. It's kind of been described as Les Miserables in space. And it really shows all the complexities of getting people on board with taking down the fascist empire, but also it shows the perspective of a few of the fascist, empire characters, which are very interesting. You haven't really gotten that in like the mentality of someone who works for the empire before, and I really like that. I think it's really, really well done. But I love that, the group of revolutionaries coming together to figure out their strategy. What do we have to do to make the justice happen?
Right.
And I think this could be a compelling movie. Ryan Coogler, we gave you the story.
Right.
Do it. I'm set. I'm here's my $20. I'm ready to watch it. By the way, something that we usually do on the show is we talk about a spooky thing that has happened to you. Do you have any paranormal or spooky experiences?
I do have one, which I don't know if it's true or not, but I was in college and I picked up a little old man who needed a ride to the hospital because he said he had cancer and he needed treatment.
Oh.
And the weirdest thing, and I don't know if it's true or if it was just me, but I swear to God, he was like a spirit or a ghost.
Oh my gosh.
I don't have any reason. I didn't see him float. I opened the door. He left. He said that. But I had a whole feeling the whole time he was with me that he was a ghost or a spirit. So, and to this day, I still have that same, I can feel that same, I don't know, emotion or just feeling that that guy was a spirit or a ghost. I swear he was.
Do you feel that maybe he was like in the middle of a transition to the other side? So he had that mystical, like he was between worlds.
I often wonder if he just didn't like pass, maybe die like very soon after that. Mm-hmm. So like his spiritual essence was already kind of on its way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of silly because I have no proof of anything other than just my own feeling that this was a spirit or a ghost of some sort. And it's kind of corny, but to this day, I can still just really like feel that in me, that was some sort of a spirit.
That's really cool, though. I feel like you had like a little encounter with the other side. I'm very into like near-death experiences.
I had one that, again, it's nothing I can really say I had, proof of, but I had bought a townhouse. And the first couple nights I kept hearing people talking and it was so scary. It was really scary because I would look and nobody was there. And I was sitting in my bed, like there are people in my house. And one of the little old ladies that I took care of said to me, there's probably spirits. And what you need to do is go out of your room where you're hearing it in the house and just say nicely, listen, you're frightening me. Could you please not talk or at least do it where I can't hear you because you're frightening me. Should just say it really nicely. And again, I don't know if it's, just your mind, can't think of the phrase of, you're making it up in my mind. But I did. I heard talking and it wasn't loud or mean. It was just sounded like a couple people chit-chatting. And I just went out in my hallway and I very nicely said, you're fine to be here. I don't have a problem, but you are scaring me. So, and I need to sleep and work. So if you could please just hold it down, I'll be really happy and everything will be good. Never heard it again.
Amazing. Amazing.
So, the same thing. I really feel it was true. If there were some spirits hanging out, I asked them nicely, to keep it down and they did.
See, you just got to be polite. I think with all situations, you just got to be polite and it works out. You don't need to have exorcisms.
I think if it was true, again, they probably didn't know they were frightening me. They probably just figured they were doing their thing.
Yeah.
Like anybody would if somebody said to you, hey, you're scaring me. You go, oh, sorry, I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And again, I have no proof of it, but I do feel very, very strongly that was happening.
How long did you live there?
I lived there just a couple years. How
old was the house?
I don't think it was that old. But again, it was a townhouse and there was a lot of turnover of old people. And, I work with old people. So sometimes I feel like I have a little bit of that connection because I work with so many people who are end of life or who die where I work. Yeah. So I feel like I have a little bit of that connection.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. And again, another funny story is my daughter, my middle child, she was young, 7 or 8, maybe 9. And I took her to work with me. And there was one of my clients' granddaughter was there with her brand new baby. And, the cute baby, we wiggled at it and stuff. And as we were walking to the car, my daughter said to me, Mommy, there's something wrong with the baby. And I said, what do you mean? The baby's fine. And she said, no, Mommy, something is wrong with that baby. And that night, the baby died a SIDS death.
Oh, my gosh. How old was your daughter?
She was 7 or 8, maybe.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was so creepy because I was like, ooh, like, but how did she know that? So I don't know if she has a little of that or if maybe just because she was a child, she picked that up from the baby. but the baby unfortunately passed away from SIDS that night.
That's amazing. See,
so those are my 3 stories, and that's all I got. But they're all really interesting, I think.
Yeah, that is like, I've done a lot of like looking into past lives and stuff, and a lot of kids remember their past life up until like they're about 7, and then they start to forget it. So I really think like kids, like before they're 7 or 8, they have some magical like connection, but unfortunately a lot of adults shut that down and say, oh, you're just, that's your imaginary friend, you're just imagining that, stop telling stories, stop. And a lot of like the psychic people that I follow, instead of their parents shutting it down, their parents would focus a lot on asking the child constantly, how do you feel about this decision? Or, they really encourage the child to be in touch with their feelings. And that's something that in our culture, we don't encourage children to be in touch with their feelings at all. We tell children to obey. We tell, be quiet, obey, you're annoying me,
Yeah, I definitely, as a mother, agree, because I had a lot of what, I wouldn't say people thought I was, hippie or, granola or anything, because obviously, look at me, I'm not. But I always allowed my children, one thing was they could always cut their hair however they wanted it, because I wanted them to have some autonomy.
Yeah.
Because what autonomy did children have? But I always gave them that. Or I would always say to them, before they got in trouble, I always said, if you tell the truth, you will not get in trouble. But if you lie, that's where we get in trouble. And my children, even to this day, very, very rarely lie to me. And they're very open. And again, I would
tell you're safe,
to talk to me about these different things. And even like you said, like they all had imaginary friends, and we never treated them imaginary. My one daughter's imaginary friend was named Clammy. I don't know why, but it was Clammy. And Clammy was allowed to come with us. And Clammy how was Clammy today? So I agree with you. I think that a lot of parents don't do that, because most of the time everybody looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, I know I'm crazy, but
you have a gift.
They don't know I was crazy. They just assumed it because I, allowed my kids to do that. And I don't regret it, because all my kids are extremely, I'm going to be bragging. Well, let's not be a bragging mom. My kids are great. We'll stop there.
Well, and it sounds like your kids can trust you. Your kids will talk to you because they know you're a safe space, and they're going to open up to you.
Yeah, as we've discussed before, I wanted my children to have that trust. If you shut it down, like anything, if you shut down that they want to be artistic or that they might be queer or anything like that, if you shut that down, it can really teach kids to just, close off.
This is such a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Judy.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was, again, so much fun. I really appreciate it. And I love learning cool things and especially about people who not only helped other people but helped themselves. That's so fascinating. She's a queen, that's all I can say.
She needs to be the subject of multiple movies. We need to be learning about her in school and not Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, and I say this as an Italian, that's 100% true.
Well, this has been Haunted Hollywood Hour. If you want to follow us on Instagram, we are Haunted Hollywood Hour Podcast, all one word on Instagram. Please, if you could, give us a little rating and review wherever you're listening so that other people can find us. And you are always welcome to be on the show anytime. If you want to come on and talk about some interesting thing from Hollywood history, I'm all ears. Send me an email at hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com. And if you just want to send us an email for any reason at all, tell us how we're doing, give us a suggestion, want to share an idea that we could do for a future episode, again, hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com. Until next time, bye.